According to IGN, there's some female orcs that I truly loved, but there's one orc in particular who's very, very tall and strong, who has a particularly enjoyable fight with one of our elven characters that I suspect will be a favorite among fans, says Lord of the Rings producer. So, as you can imagine, a lot of people are making fun of this. They're calling the Hur-Uk High. And the question is this upsetting to fans or not? And my answer is like, it's not really upsetting, but you're removing the mysticism of the races. See, in fantasy and Lord of the Rings especially, the races aren't the same like here on Earth, like the difference between an Asian person and a white person. When you say race in a fantasy setting, you're actually meaning about a completely different entity. I mean, the difference between orcs and elves is like they're different species, and they embody different attributes of mankind. Now, the thing with the orcs, in Lord of the Rings especially, you're not supposed to relate with them. You're supposed to dislike them. They're supposed to be the antagonist. They're supposed to be the bad guy. It's to simplify the story. And if they have mothers as well, and if they become relatable as well, it takes away from that element. Now, I'm not saying orcs can't be relatable in some fantasy settings, but they shouldn't be relatable in Lord of the Rings. They should just be an evil that needs to be vanquished so that the heroes can champion. I mean, the whole cool aspect of Lord of the Rings is that you have all of these different races, the dwarves and the elves and the humans, and they don't get along with each other. Because each of them are very flawed in their own way. But they have to put aside their difference and work together in order to combat this great threat, this threat of Sauron, which is raising an army to purge Middle-earth of dwarves and humans and elves. There's no negotiating with him, there's no peace treaty, there's no cohabitation. You either put aside your differences and you stand together, or you lose. And that's what made it an interesting story. And again, Tolkien didn't have to go on detail to explain why the orcs are bad, to go through the motivation of the orcs. It's just like when you look at them, it's like, okay, well, these are the villains. All right. The good guys need to come up and find a way to get rid of them. Because otherwise, why wouldn't the good guys just do diplomacy? Why wouldn't they just talk with the orcs? I mean, you would have a different book altogether. It would be more like Game of Thrones, where there's political intrigue. And I'm not saying that can't be an interesting fantasy setting, but it shouldn't be this. Like, this should be something else. So that's the thing, you know, like they're making the fantasy races too human. And I seen this done with Picard, where the Romulans that Picard was interacting with, they were just like average human beings, and they keep removing the difference between races in a fantasy setting. And it's like, well, yeah, but like the ratings are, the races are what drives the drama in the actual story. Because otherwise, whether it's fantasy or it's sci-fi, like, why even bother having the Vulcans? Why even bother having the Romulans? Why even bother having the dwarves and having the elves if they're just going to be like humans? If they're going to be identical to the humans. Now, I'm not saying that the orcs in this setting are identical to the humans, but, you know, the fact that we didn't know how orcs are made, it was part of the magic. Like, you don't want to peer behind the curtain. You don't want to see how the magician performs the tricks. And in this particular case, it also contradicts what most people know about Lord of the Rings from the movies. The Twin Towers, I believe, showed how Saruman was creating orcs by pulling them out of the ground. And, you know, like, that was a different way. Like, they were so alien compared to how humans are, that it added that aura of dread and mysticism that the orcs needed in order to be the villains. But now if you're just going to have, oh, well, like, this is a Hur-Uk-High, and she's like, and this is unironically posted by Facebook, by the way, like, Hur-Uk-High, right? I mean, yeah, sure, I guess, but you're just making them humans, you know? And there are a lot of people who saw the trailer for Lord of the Rings is afraid that it's going to be Game of Thrones, but within the Lord of the Rings setting. And unfortunately, I can't say that I would be surprised if this happens. Is the fact that American entertainment lost its soul. They don't create for the sake of art anymore. They don't want to make something that's beautiful and that, money comes second. They are so confident that they created something beautiful that they know money is there, but that's not the main drive. Nowadays, it's the other way around. It's like, okay, what does create money? What exactly do people want to see? Oh, Game of Thrones. Well, they like Game of Thrones. Let's give them more Game of Thrones. And unfortunately, when Game of Thrones can't be manufactured. That's the problem. It was written creatively and from the heart of R.R. Martin, and that's why it's great. But you can't get a couple of people in a boardroom and manufacture Game of Thrones. It just doesn't work that way. And you're going to get some corporate bland stuff. Now, I hope that this will fail, to be honest. Lord of the Rings, in my opinion, has to fail for American entertainment to succeed. A lot of money is poured into it. A lot of money is invested into it. And it does do all of the wrong things that I hate to see in American entertainment, which is a lot of corporatism. It's very corporate. It reeks of boardrooms when I'm looking at it. And I just want that to stop. I want it back like in the 90s when you had someone with a great story and they would come up and be like, hey, we got a great script. Can you make a movie out of it? Was it like another reboot, a sequel, or something inspired from a new IP? It's like, no, we came up with this concept. It's called RoboCop. You guys want to film it? I think it's great. I think it's going to resonate with the public. And they kept making original IPs. They kept making original stuff. But now it's just like, even this is Lord of the Rings. The reason they're making it is because the movies were popular. I'm willing to guarantee that in a universe where Lord of the Rings movies didn't exist and you just had the books, they wouldn't care about making this. And most people are making fun of it. Now, this is on the IGN board. And it's like the female orcs will have to fight 2 times harder than the male orcs to get the same position. When the female orcs go on maternity leaves, the male orcs have to be upset. Right? So, this is on IGN. These are IGN subscribers that are making fun of this decision. And people were pointing out the same with female dwarves without beards and stuff. It's almost like this show is not for you. If you're a Lord of the Ring fans, they're taking you for granted. They're saying, oh, well, they're going to watch anyway. Now let's appeal for the wider audience. Let's try to get the people who don't like or don't know about Lord of the Rings. Let's appeal to them. What do they like? What does the people who work in corporate America like? Oh, well, they like inclusion. They like diversity. They like talking about the environment. And they're adding all of that into it at the expense of the actual IP, the actual franchise. Like, oh, well, dwarven women have beards. Yeah, but that's not going to fly on the screen now, is it? People are not going to like seeing that. So let's not have that because it looks ridiculous. Let's take it away. What do people like? Oh, they like diversity. Okay, well, let's make black hobbits and black dwarves. Very low effort, basically. Instead of actually focusing on interesting, rich stories from within Middle-earth that do have black people. Again, I believe it's the Easterlings. I would have loved to see a story about that. But that would take effort. It would take money to have those sets. So instead, just throw a couple of black hobbits there. And it's like, okay, well, they did their job, right? They're very progressive. And the fans don't really appreciate it. And that's okay. You can call them a racist. So that's good marketing. Let me know what you guys think, though. And I'll see you in the comment section. Take care.